So we would really love this session to be interactive and to ask the panel questions as we go along. So rather than waiting to the end, Jenny Howard, who's our Global Director of Risk and Compliance, is going to be supporting me with managing the questions so as we go along. Jen?
Hi everyone. Yeah, as Bernie said, I'm Jen. Really looking forward to listening to the discussion today. I will try to manage the questions. Please do pop them in as we go along, and I will try to just sort of throw them into the conversation as we go. Looking forward to listening to everyone.
Wonderful, thanks, Jen. And just to thank Lexmark, our sponsor again, so key supporter of the HCSA Women's Network and focus heavily on CSR and sustainability and social value responsibilities, and very committed to raising the profile of the good work being done in the network. So why am I here? I've had the absolute pleasure and privilege over the recent months to embark on a piece of work talking to women. So I've interviewed over 150 women, female leaders in tech in the NHS, and they've given me insight into their experiences, their careers, and the things that sort of happen to us in life as we're moving forward in our careers. And more recently, we've really realised that having that conversation with women about women is a really uninclusive activity to do. So I've started an additional series around allyship, and so far I've had 20 male CIOs take part in that series, but it's really building momentum and a little bit of a movement around that. I just want to remind us all why we're actually here and a few words around International Women's Day and what it stands for and why we do it. So it's a global celebration of the social, economic, cultural and political achievements of women. Each year, this day serves as a powerful reminder of the progress made towards gender equality and highlights the work that still needs to be done. In 2024, the campaign Inspire Inclusion emphasises the importance of diversity and empowerment of all aspects of society. This year's campaign theme underscores the crucial role of inclusion in achieving gender equality. It calls for action to break down barriers, challenge stereotypes, and create environments where all women are valued and respected. Inspire Inclusion encourages everyone to recognise the unique perspectives and contributions of women from all walks of life, including those from marginalised communities. One of the key pillars of Inspire Inclusion is the promotion of diversity in leadership and decision-making positions. Women, especially those belonging to underrepresented groups, continue to face barriers when seeking leadership roles. By championing inclusion, organisations and communities can harness the full potential of diverse perspectives, leading to better decision-making and innovation. So, with all of that in mind, I would like to introduce our panel. Firstly, Pia Larson, Chief Procurement Officer at GSTT. Pia, would you possibly introduce yourself and give us a very brief overview of your background?
Morning, everyone. I'm sure I know lots and lots of you, but I'm Pia Larson. I'm the Chief Procurement Officer at Guy's and St Thomas's. I have a major passion for equality and diversity, but also for gender equality, and have written lots of research on gender equality and how we support and progress women in their careers. So I'm a real passionate supporter. So thanks for having me on the panel today, Bernie.
Thanks a million, Pia. Savita Mace is the Chief Procurement Officer at University Hospital Sussex. Savita, will you give us a brief intro to you and the work that you do?
Hello, I'm Savita Mace. Good morning to all of you. It's lovely to see everybody, and it's really lovely that everybody's smiling. It's only 5 minutes into the broadcast. So I'm Savita Mace. I am the Chief Procurement Officer here at UH Sussex and the ICS lead. That's one of the hats I wear. The other hat is I'm a lecturer for Durham University, Sussex University, and I help with the master's program in procurement and supply in terms of creating relevant content and syllabus and ensuring that the next generation have something inclusive when they study procurement and supply, and it's just not hardcore academia. I also am a trustee at Shout at Cancer. It is the only charity with a choir that has no voice boxes, because I'm also a singer. So I do a lot of work with inclusion for people with no voice, literally no voice. So this is my passion in terms of diversity, inclusion, and not just a talk, but walking it, because as you'll hear later in the program about my work with gender pay gap going back many, many years. So I am really thrilled and honored that you have invited me today. Thank you.
We really can't wait to talk to you more about it. Michael Pace is the MD of London Procurement Partnership. Lovely to have you with us here today, Michael. Thank you for taking time out of your journey to join us. Will you possibly introduce yourself?
Yeah, Bernie. So actually I've moved on from LPP now, so I'm now the CPO at Barts Health. So I've been there since October last year. I think for me, you know, I started coming on this journey with Tracy. She was quite convincing to sort of to bring me along on there. And before I started this journey, I used to think that I was sort of, you know, quite open and very diverse in my thinking and what I was doing. I've surprised myself how much I've learned over the last 2 years. And, you know, I think it's something that's really, really important. And yeah, even though I used to think that I was, you know, very open and that there are lots of things sort of going on that I just didn't see or didn't know. And I didn't know to ask those questions. So I'm learning quite a lot. And, you know, even from our conversation last week, I've learned a lot more as well. Yeah, look, it's a really, really important. I'm enjoying it because I'm learning a lot on there, and hopefully, you know, as we start to talk about allyship and what that means, I can be part of that journey with you guys and support as well.
All about it in a moment. And also we have Harvey Sanger, who's head of data analytics, e-commerce and transactional procurement at BSOL. Harvey, would you possibly introduce yourself and your background?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you for having me. So I've got extensive background in procurement. So at the moment, as well as my role, which Bernie just introduced, I won't say it again because it's quite a mouthful. I also am the res expert for the West Midlands, and in a previous organisation, as per the direction of the trust and the chairman, I was also part of setting up the BAME network within that organisation. So I really like to get involved with the voice of the people, the voice of the staff at frontline, because at the end of the day, there are you know, the ones at the coalface, they're the ones that are facing the day-to-day issues. And I think sometimes as you move through the ranks and you get into higher management, you kind of lose that foresight of what's happening at the front line. So I'm really about getting those voices heard and taking it to where it needs to be taken to make the change and to improve the culture of any organisation that I'm working within. So I'd really like to work on that, really listening to voices of everyone.
Thank you, Harvey. Thank you. And we'll talk a lot more about some of those things that you've just mentioned. So my first question to all of you, the theme is obviously International Women's Day 24, and it's all around inspiring inclusion. So my first question to the panel is, what does that mean to you personally? Anyone can answer.
Well, I'm happy to go first.
Thanks,
So
Sabina.
that's all right. Well, I mean, I suppose inclusion means to me, and I can see the faces of everyone on this screen now, and it's about that. It's about, for me, it's about me as a CPO, me as a female leader, ensuring that I represent the varying identities of all of us here and in my team or in my charity or whatever I do in my daily life, to make people feel welcomed, people feel belong there, they're represented and they're heard, but also to make conscious improvements for systematic changes to remove any kind of barriers. So everybody with the varying identities do belong. That's what it means to me.
Lovely. And would any of the rest of the panel like to join in there and explain?
I'll jump in, Bernie, if that's okay.
Thanks, Pia.
I think when it comes to inclusion, there's oftentimes a lot of discussion about equality and how we treat people, and equality and diversity is oftentimes thought through in a way that means that there's an expectation that we treat people equally. And actually, in reality, what we need to think about is how do we treat people differently in order that they can access and be included when there are different factors that affect different people. So inclusion for me is about how we think about interacting with our teams, both equitably, but also differently, and how do we facilitate people making their best contribution that they can. And in terms of what that means in terms of inspiring inclusion, if you like, in terms of the theme of International Women's Day, that is really about creating a safe space, a psychologically safe space for people in which to operate, to learn, to grow, to be trusted. but still with that accountability from a sort of, you know, from a work and management perspective. And creating opportunities, intentional creation of opportunities, and intentionally calling out where things are inequitable. And I've had a strong conversation with one of my workforce colleagues in the last week, where we talked about agenda for change, for example. An agenda for change was designed to create transparency and equity of pay. Now, it's my view that it doesn't do that, and that is a little time expired. And the reason for that is we have strict application of criteria for job selection, which actually, in effect, creates inequality. And these are some of the things that, you know, as leaders, we need to put some thought into. We need to think, what is stopping more people being included? What are the barriers, like Sabita said? What are the barriers for people to be more included? And sometimes they are structural, job adverts, job criteria, and all those sorts of things. Sometimes they are cultural. How do people feel as though they can make a contribution and they will be heard and feel as though they are seen within the context of that conversation?
I love that, Pia. So what you're really saying is that one size doesn't fit all. It's got
certainly
to
not
be
in
that
my view. Yeah, certainly not in my view. There's a fabulous little cartoon that I refer to, which is about people being able to see over the fence. And, you know, some people are short, some people are tall, some people are sort of, you know, I don't know, might have a broken leg, whatever it is, just to use the metaphor. And we need to therefore provide them with different enablement to allow them to see over the fence. And really, that's what inclusion is about. How do we flex? How do we be agile? How do we do something that is, because actually, if you treat everybody equally, in fact, we create disparity. So there's something about how do we think about equality through the lens of embracing difference.
Yeah, and I think so we all need to sort of take responsibility rather than seeing that as someone else's problem. So I'd like to sort of invite comments from the panel around what can we actually be doing at team level, department level, organisation level to actually contribute to making those tiny little changes that actually add up to overall change.
I think, Bernie, just for me, and just picking up on that point as well, it's one of the things I've probably learned more over the last couple of years is how to listen and really listen to the pauses as well, and making sure that, you know, people don't feel left out or left behind, especially when you're in group situations, and just being aware that it's really, really important to listen to everybody's voice and ensure that everybody has that voice or the opportunity to have that voice in there. You know, there's lots of times where, you know, you'll see people all shapes and sizes, you know, want to say something in a meeting, but are just not given that opportunity because they're not being seen. And I think as leaders, it's really, really important that we make sure we are there watching and looking and creating those opportunities, you know, like we've all been talking about.
So there's a great saying is that you might be sort of invited to the party, but have you actually been invited onto the dance floor? So yeah. It's as leaders, if we can sort of spot those moments, and it might be just someone's, might not be actually saying anything. It might be just actually their behaviour or their body language. And so it's really subtle, very, very subtle situations that we need to sort of learn to tune in and kind of pick up on.
Can I just add something to the back of what Michael's just said? So I think, you know, that's really important, Michael, around the listening. So whenever I'm leading a team, I always like to get to know my staff really individually as well on a one-to-one basis and really understand where they're wanting to take their career, what challenges they face, and seeing what I can do to help overcome those barriers. And I think we need to remove assumptions as well, because I think sometimes you just assume because it's a female, she's got kids, she may not want to progress in a career, because it's someone who's got mobility issues or any form of disability, or maybe, you know, they're not capable, they don't want to progress, but you can have loads of adaptations and help support them progress their career. So I think it's about listening to them, listening to where their dreams and aspirations are, and seeing what you can do to support those. And don't just assume because someone fits a certain criteria in your head that that's basically as far as they want to get to. And, you know, and I found sometimes having to speak to staff at all levels, it's really interesting to see where they really want to get to and why they haven't progressed, because other people have just assumed that they don't want to go nowhere, and no one's actually ever spoken to them or listened to them. So that's what I'd like to add.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful, Harvey. Is there anything there in sort of your own personal experiences that has maybe sort of taught you anything around that? Because I always think that it's our own personal experiences that shape us and then help us to maybe better leaders.
I think as female leaders and as leaders, I think in the UK in particular, we have the Equality Act. We have to upskill ourselves in all aspects of the Act and our teams. And I think a lot of people try to sort of get their teams on board with, like Pia said, like equity, about equitable initiatives or equitable systems. But we have laws there to protect us, the 9 characteristics. And I think following the law, ensuring that everybody in your leadership team are upskilled and understand about those protective characteristics, about what's legal, what's in our gift to sort of champion, and these systems are there to protect everyone. So I think from a legal aspect, I would definitely say, for me in particular, as I rose up in the kind of industry and corporate ladder, I definitely had to upskill myself with all of the legislation in whichever jurisdiction I was in around the world about the Equality Act. And here in the UK, we have something that protects our characteristics.
Important point. Savitha, I'm going to come and ask you a few sort of questions directed specifically to yourself. So I know that you've done a lot of work around the gender pay gap. I'd really like to understand what sort of sparked your interest in that. Was it something personal, or was it something within the workplace? And then tell us a little bit about what you actually achieved through that work.
Thank you. That's a really good question. So, as you know, I grew up in the Caribbean, and I grew up in a very simple home. My mother couldn't read or write. However, she told me almost every day that one day I will have a degree and I'll be a manager. For no idea what that meant at the time, but I was a girl with very little options. Women had very little options when I was growing up, and I suppose when I did my SIPs, I saw 97% men in the SIPs class. I was doing night class. When I got to the UK, I joined a big global company. I don't have to call the name, but less than 5% of female leaders were women. And when I was at that company, I joined a group of women, including Dame Kelly Holmes, and we went to Parliament in 2010. And we started championing for gender pay gap. Unfortunately, it only became law in 2017 under the Equality Act anyway, which is great. So all companies over 250 more employees have to publish the gender pay gap now since 2017. But I was reading a study recently in the UK that published for Global Stats, it'll take us 257 years to close the global gender pay gap. I know that's really demoralizing, but it has got better in the UK, and I suppose for me it's about, I want one of my legacy to be that in my career, in my life as a mother, I wanted things and spaces to be different for women when I retire. And joining that gender pay gap and joining D&I groups make me feel a sense of belonging, because I know I belong there, because I was a girl with no options, and creating options for other girls and other women is something that I'm passionate about. So I suppose when I joined that company, less than 4% women were female leaders. But then I made conscious decisions, because I've been in industry for 23 years. So in 2018, 2019, I can't remember now, I joined a company that had 52% female leaders. And I thought, well, those are the decisions I'm making. And for us as women, I think we have choices now. We have choices. We have choices about who we work for. We have choices about where we work, which country we're working. I think it's about us making conscious decisions about how we invest our time, with whom we invest our time with, and how do we pay forward. So that's kind of a little bit about my background and story.
Wonderful. And sorry, Pierre. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to make some more comments about the gender pay gap. It's something I'm really passionate about, if that's okay, Bernie. If some of you will know, I've just finished my MBA, and part of that was looking at the gender pay gap, or the underpinning background to that was to look at the gender pay gap. And the reason I did that is because I was privy to the gender pay gap report. And when I asked the question of how can we work in the NHS where all our organisations are broadly speaking 70% female, yet we have a gender pay gap, that didn't really make sense to me. So I started to look into this, and just to give a few sort of stats around that, for hospital doctors in the UK, the gender pay gap is over 20%, 24.4%, which is incredible. And even accounting for the differential hours worked, women in hospitals are paid 80 to 85% as much as men for the same hours, okay, which is really quite shocking. The pay gap increases with age, and also women who work less than full time almost never catch up to their male counterparts in terms of pay. And these things are, they are quite confronting actually when we have a workforce that is over 70% female. And what my research looked at was not the kind of typically obvious things around women taking maternity pay and maternity leave and all those sorts of, the work family narrative, it's called. And more I focused on what are the structural and cultural and personal barriers that impact negatively on women's career progression. And what I looked at there was sort of, as I say, the structural and cultural matters about, you know, a lack of female leaders in senior specialties and the structural things to do with the medical training pathway. But these things present themselves all the time as we move through both our own jobs and through our society. I met with my school last week to have a discussion about a structural barrier, which was in effect the start time of Breakfast Club. And I said, you're opening too late, right? I can't get to London and get to my desk by dropping off my child at 10 to 8. It's too late. So you are in effect creating a structural barrier for me to access work, and this has a disproportionate impact on women. So she was very taken by this argument, and she's a new head coming into the school. And I think we have a sort of responsibility to try to think about what is actually contributing to the gender pay gap. And it's actually very subtle, it's very powerful, but it's not what everyone necessarily likes to point at, which is women take time off for maternity leave and women work flexibly, which means they work less than full time, which is the easy narrative. It is far more complex than that, and how women participate in the workforce and how the structural matters around it, around that, contribute to the career progression of women. And that's really a very different lens to think about what's driving the gender pay gap. And you know that there's a lot more research about it that is changing the narrative about what's contributing to the gender pay gap. I'll stop there.
No, and what's what from your findings? You've done a lot of research on identifying what tiny little things do you think that we can all be doing? Is it us collectively having a voice? Is it trying to create policy change within organisations? What do you think? Because I think it's brilliant that we're all here today. There's a number of women here today, all passionate on the subject, all really interested in the subject. What can we all actually be doing? Jen, you had a point?
Yeah, it was just something that come through on the chat from Nicola Harper, where she's mentioned something very practical that I think is relevant to it, where from her research that women apply for roles when they hit 86% of essential criteria for a job, compared to men who will apply hitting 56%. And I just thought it's very relevant to this topic of the gender pay gap. Nicola, I don't know if you want to expand on that or whether you want the panel to, Ben.
Yeah, I think so I run the public sector business nationally for Michael Page, and I'm 18 years at Page, and we've had a big Women at Page programme for the last 10 years. So I have personally experienced a phenomenal change in what Page has done. But I have this conversation all the time with people in the wider public sector and the NHS, which is when you look at a job at the moment in procurement, the job volumes are insane. There are jobs everywhere, and particularly at this kind of band 7, band 6 level, it's really hard to find good people in the market. And I think there's just a piece where people look at jobs, and when you look at the essential criteria, it is really challenging yourselves on actually, if a really great up and coming person was going to look at this and were probably 70 to 80% able to do the job to leave room for development, is that person going to deselect out of it? Are they a talent of the future that's kind of on the cusp, but will they just not apply in the first place? And we do spend a lot of our time talking to our organisations and saying, like, but that one person that deselects out could be an incredible talent of the future for your organisation. But I think there's just a disconnect sometimes with the wider NHS, where there's lots of essential criteria in there. And actually, when we work through it with line managers before we're going to go to market, we do end up taking quite a bit out of it. And then you get a phenomenal result. And I think we presented it at the Women's Network last year, the case study on Bristol and Western. We worked really, really hard with them on their job descriptions and their job adverts. And I think the balance has ended up with placed 18 people, and I think 70% were women. So it's made a huge difference just to the volume of people coming through, but people who were applying who probably wouldn't have applied for it before. Because I think the Women's Network is so critical, but you also want new people coming through to be part of the movement and part of the change. And so our work is to try and support you in doing that, but it's such a small change that just makes a massive impact to attraction.
Wonderful, Nicola, thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on a little bit from the topic of the gender pay gap. And Michael, I want to bring you in here to talk a little bit about allyship. So putting you on the spot a little bit, what does the word allyship actually mean to you?
It probably means a lot more to me this week than what it did to in our conversation earlier last week. I think it's like I said, I think it's really important that, you know, someone in my position needs to take the time to really listen and not just hear the words, but really understand the words. Make sure that, you know, I'm helping you guys to create the voice, taking the lessons that I'm learning and making sure that that's, you know, being spoken up about with my counterparts and my colleagues. You know, today I think there's only 3 of us. I can't see everybody because I'm only on my phone, but I think there's only 3 men on here, and I think it's just really, really important that we encourage more men to come along to these things and to really understand. I mean, you know, we just talked about, you know, pay and the difference in pay until, you know, Piers started talking about it and others around me started talking about it. I was oblivious to it, not because I wanted to be ignorant about it or anything like that, but I didn't understand, because I thought, oh, we've got a gender for pay, so we're all on the same pay, so, you know, what's the problem, you know? And then, but listening and understanding, okay, I'm starting to understand that now, so what can I do to do something different? So I think it's you know, making sure that, like I said, I listen, I understand, and where I'm not sure about things, whereas I used to make assumptions, I'm trying to ask more questions now and trying to sort of you know, really probe a little bit harder. I make mistakes. I know I make mistakes because I'm still trying to find my way around this and I'm still learning. So, you know, making sure that, you know, when I do make a mistake, understanding that I've made a mistake, why have I made that mistake, learn from that and obviously apologize and look to move forward. And hopefully that's not held against me as we sort of start to move those things on and, you know, I suppose just really supporting to try and change this agenda and, you know, make it a better place for everybody.
I really love your honesty, and I think it's you know, it's we're not a scary bunch, are we? You know, it's trying to sort of make it really inclusive for absolutely everyone and encouraging more men into these sorts of scenarios. So 3 is great. We obviously want more people to come along to these types of things to educate themselves. We were having a conversation earlier on in the week, and we were talking about sort of what this what allyship can do and how that can actually help move a movement forward. And I asked you the questions that sort of to think about for today, but have you ever felt compelled to sort of call out any behaviour that you didn't feel was okay? And a sub part to that question is maybe, how did that make you feel on that occasion?
I think I'm doing it a lot more now than what I used to do it. Part of it was because I didn't recognise some of it, and part of it was I wasn't sure how to tackle it, and what to do. Even though you're a leader in these things, sometimes when you see these things happening, going, oh, okay, yeah, I know that's not quite right, but I wasn't sure what to do. So again, it's just trying to find out, and then sort of interjection. I know I interject a lot more now than what I used to do. But I know I've still got a lot to learn, and try and pick up on some of the subtle things as well.
Pia, would you like to come in here?
Yeah, I'd love to. In terms of some of the things that I think become very practical, that sometimes are actually quite subtle and quite small. For those of you who knew me in my UCLH days, I had a cartoon which I could share with you, which was of a board table with a range of people sitting around it, all men with one woman. And the catchphrase of that says, thanks for the suggestion, Miss Triggs. Perhaps one of the men would like to make it. And this is it's a very subtle way of communicating within an organisation about whether or not women have a voice and whether or not they should be heard. And certainly, as you all know, I'm a very proactive caller out of some of these things, sometimes not in the immediate, but sometimes afterwards. And in fact, I've had many allies who I've worked with. My boss at the moment is the most significant ally I have had as I've joined Guy's and St Thomas's. And that has a phenomenal effect on how I've felt coming into a new organisation. And really what that has looked like has been unwavering support, but also he has gone into bat with me without me asking, around people undermining, other men undermining me. And, that has been very empowering. And it wasn't something I asked him to do. It was something he took of his own decision making. But there's a lot of power in language, okay? And we hear it a lot. It's how we refer to each other, and it's how sometimes men interact with us as females. Apparently, already at Guys and Tommies, I have been referred to as a ball breaker. Now, I actually find that quite complimentary.
I'm actually going to put a little love heart because of the way I love it.
Love it.
I've only been here 8 months, but that's about accountability. But what I'm saying is that would never happen to a man. Okay, that would never happen to a man who came into a new role. And then I have examples in my research where more junior doctors are referred to as bossy. The more senior consultants referring to her as darling, right? So this kind of care narrative. Come on, darling, can you just get on with doing whatever it is I'm asking you to do? I've had some experience of people relaying to me that they've been called young lady, right? It's ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous. These are things that come out unintentionally, and they all serve to create that they're abrasive. They're actually quite offensive on occasion. I have had someone called me young lady the other day, immediately corrected themselves and said, oh my gosh, I can't believe that came out of my mouth. Fair crack to them. And I said, listen, it's fine. Let's move on. It's not a problem. But these are things that can be little microaggressions. It's whether or not someone is mansplaining me when I'm like the most experienced person on that call or that meeting. It's whether or not people are cutting me off. I had a CFO before I even joined Guys and Tommies asking me, would I keep an open mind? I'm like, who are you? These things typically don't come into conversations with our male colleagues. And there's a real necessity for our male colleagues to, first of all, don't do it. Don't participate in that, even, accidentally correct yourself, educate yourself about what is, what is correct, or, sometimes it's less obvious. Feel free to ask the question. But there's also, it's important to maybe say, if you observe something, you don't need to call it out at the time, all the time. It's maybe something that's said afterwards. Did you realise this comes across as? And that's what I would encourage all of us to do, to sort of make little iterative ripples as we move through our days.
Because the term "call it out" actually sounds really, really aggressive, doesn't it? It's a confrontational thing to do. But I'm wondering, Pia, if ever you felt super brave and you've been calling something out, have you ever been worried about career consequence to calling something out?
I think I have. I think you have to sort of think about how you portray the issue, because I actually don't often think it's intentional from it's sometimes about intent. And I think yeah, well, I have called out numerous things, obviously. I've had, you know, consultants say all sorts of things to me. I've had people write stuff in emails to medical directors, you know, saying, what does Pia Larson think she knows about sutures, for example? And I'm like, I'm on the email.
Wow.
I'm on the email, I'm still reading it. And, you know, I have called it out and said to my boss, look, this is totally inappropriate. You know, it's really wrong. And I mean, this was many years ago, but and I think you have to kind of just be brave, but also to kind of say, I don't need to be aggressive about it. It's perhaps psyching an education, but I think you know, have I been worried about my career? Not really, to be honest. I just sort of feel so passionate that we have to move the agenda on. It's how you do it, I think, which is the key.
Yeah, absolutely. Savitha, have you had experience with that?
Well, I was just going to touch on the point about allyship, and Michael made a really good point about, and it's very honest of you, Michael, to say you were not aware, and I suppose there's conscious allyship and unconscious, and what he's doing is unconscious allyship, where he's educating himself. He's going to look up the stats, etc. And I mean, Harvey is probably going to tell you a lot about this, but in a lot of in a lot of different networks, there's reverse mentoring, and that's where you upskill yourself about what's really going on. So, you know, since I've been in the NHS, which is just very, very shortly, which is 1 year ago, I've had the most incredible experience with men supporting me. I could call up Rob Knott and say, what does this mean? I have no idea. I've never been in the NHS before. Keith Rowley, I've had Simon, all of these men I could call up and say, look, you look approachable. I've seen you on a call. Can you help me out? So I've had a really, really good journey so far with allyship and people supporting me in my really lack of understanding about how the NHS works, because the only experience of the NHS was me having a baby in a hospital, and I thought everything was joined up. This is one big you know, I had no idea what the NHS was like. So I think unconscious and conscious allyship is going on every day, and what Michael was talking about is unconscious allyship. People like Keith, Rob, etc., they do conscious allyship, where they support people, they support women leaders, because you know, in our careers as CPOs, we're looking after the ones coming up after us. We're looking after the next generation, and we're going to make a difference for them, because most of us are around the same age, and we didn't have it easy when we started off. Inclusion wasn't a hot topic. It wasn't something sexy that anybody talked about. In fact, the laws were not even there to protect us. So I've had a really good experience with conscious and unconscious allyship so far.
Thank you, Savitha. Harvey, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I was going to add the same really around my experience of allyship and how important it's been really in my career journey. So I went through quite a difficult time in one organisation, and it was a very senior executive of the team that was making certain comments. And from the feedback as being part of a network, you know, part of the BAME network, was that this individual would walk past other Asian females as well. You know, he would just basically not say hello to them, just literally look away and just walk past. But certain females he would acknowledge. And I remember having experience with an interview process with this individual, and it was for a director role. So I've headed up almost every area of procurement. So I've mastered lots of areas of procurement, and it was for a director post. And his feedback was, what's your cultural background? And that was absolutely irrelevant to feedback. So I was kind of like shocked. He then asked me, what are those individuals that work in that trust in Bedford? And I was like, oh my God, like, am I really hearing this? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, you know, what's those people that work in Bedford Hospital? And I said, you mean like more Pakistani people? He said, yes. He goes, so basically his point was, you know, you people tend to go too far. You go really above and beyond. Like, you don't need to say all this stuff in your interview process. You don't really need to put all this in your application pack. You're showing too much. Yeah, I think, you know, being a female, but then also of being BAME background, you have the double challenge of that as well. So you're kind of encouraged to go above and beyond. You have to do all these extra courses, do these extra degrees, show lived experiences of actual experience in roles. You know, I've been for an interview or went to apply for a job, and, you know, the comment was, well, I need to see actual real lived experiences on your application form. I want to see that you've really done this, every part of the person's spec, every part of the job. Otherwise, I'm going to be ruthless with the shortlisting and you won't even get shortlisted. So I did get shortlisted for that job because I could prove I had experience with every element of that person's spec. However, I still wasn't successful in getting that role. And I think with all of that, what was going on with this one executive, going back to that story, I had a really amazing allyship from the chair of the organisation. So this person was very powerful in his role. He actually made it very vocal that he didn't want an all-white board. He wanted to have diversity inclusion on the board. He wanted to listen to the opinions of the workforce. And I did 12 months of mentorship and reciprocal mentoring with this individual. And on the back of that, he was able to get me onto the Res Experts program. He was also able to support me and fund my NIBEVN leadership program, which I would have never dreamt of ever getting on. It's an expensive program to get on, and you're not going to be offered that at other levels. So for him to say, well, you're doing this and you're going to be doing this and support me, that was absolutely amazing. And then the other thing is, I think sometimes a lot of the problems are at middle management level. Whereas it was quite competitive, it can get, you know, people are quite, you know, they've got their own interests at heart. So I think sometimes don't be afraid to reach out at a higher level, because you know, the board is willing to listen, and there is a voice there. So I did a lot of work with the Freedom Speak Up Guardian. I was a Freedom Speak Up champion in my organisation as well. And then through that, I was also able to reach out to previous chief executives that I worked with, and I could literally ring certain chief executives. Like I rang one chief executive to give me a reference because I'd done a number of corporate projects. And within 10-15 minutes of my call to his secretary, he actually phoned me, and this was after 10 years having not worked with this person. So I think there's a lot of support out there at a high level. And you know, I had such a tough time in this one role that I actually was thinking of leaving procurement altogether after 23 years in the role. You know, of 23 years of procurement, I actually wanted to change career and do something totally different. And had it not been for my current managing director, who's been so supportive where I'm currently working, I don't think I would have been in procurement now. So that's Simon Clark, and I'd like to call out his name because he's been absolutely amazing. And also supporting me and being part of the Healthcare Suppliers Association as the West Midlands Regional Coordinator. So his support's been astronomical. It's been amazing. And I just think that, you know, you shouldn't be afraid to reach out higher up than just middle management. You need to, you know, sometimes the exec team are totally oblivious to what's going on. They don't even know all the challenges that we're facing at, you know, a certain level. So I think, you know, definitely reach out to other people. And Michael's on the call as well. And I've had a conversation with Michael before, and he's been really great and supportive as well. So I'd like to add that as well.
Oh, Harvey, I feel like, honestly, everyone should probably be giving you a bit of a round of applause. It's an amazing story. And I'm sure it's emotionally exhausting having to sort of face those challenges. But you're doing it, and that's absolutely amazing. But I think it just takes an awful lot of effort. It takes bravery. It takes intent to do that every day and kind of have that fight. Some days we're not feeling like we want to fight, are we? But sort of continuing that, I just think that's absolutely amazing. Saritha, I'll bring you in here.
Yeah, I suppose that was a really good story, Harvey. Thank you for sharing that. It's quite brave of you to share stories like that, and you know, I guess it comes with experience and feeling like you're in a safe space to share stories like that. I just wanted to add one more thing, and Bernadette, you asked about, are there practical things that we can do as leaders, male or female? And I suppose I don't know how to put this in a more eloquent way, but I suppose for the men in the room, look up in terms of think about you as a man, as a husband, as a dad, whatever it is, and ensure that you have systems and processes in place, especially for when women come back from maternity. So I remember 8 years ago when I had my daughter, I came back from maternity early and there was no breastfeeding room. So I wanted to pump to take the milk back. There's no room with a lock. There's no fridge. I mean, since then, every company I've gone to, I've made sure there's a room where people can pump and take their milk back home. And it's stuff like that as a husband, as a father, whatever, you know, it's at home, it's common. You know, you have these conversations, but you go to work and it's sort of like, even as females, I mean, and I won't ask it, but how many of us, because we're all leaders in this room, how many of us have actually thought about simple things that we can make better for each other as mothers, as women, as carers, etc. It's those things. So I would say look up, look around, be conscious of the humans that we work with and what small things people need. Because if they need it at home, they're going to need it at work for 8 hours as well. So those are the kind of simple things, and that kind of chat to people. Just have a chat. If you're a CPO, if you're a CEO in the room, just chat to people and ask them, do I have not only the tech tools or whatever you need for your work, but do I have what it takes in this department, in this organization that brings you joy for 8 hours? Maybe I can't put a pool table or a foosball, whatever we have in private sector. But do I have the basics? Do I have the sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs for you when you come to work? So if it's anything you take away from me today is just look up and check for those things in your organization.
I guess, Savita, what you're actually saying is bringing in, using your privilege to help others.
I completely agree with what Savita's just saying and everything, and you know, and I think of my journey, and I've got 2 daughters and a son, and you know, I know what my wife went through with that, and you know, I'll be very open here. It's only over the last few years that I've suddenly realised the lessons that I was learning with my wife and what she was going through. I never brought them into the workplace. You know, I was too busy doing the work and trying to sort of structure my own career and drive, you know, what I wanted to try and achieve in my own career, to look up and look around and, you know, bring people with me. And again, I think it just comes back to, you know, making sure that, you know, we listen and we try to understand and you know, we pick up on those points. Like I say, I'm still on that journey. I'm still learning. I probably will learn for the rest of my career in you know, bringing these things to the front. But one of the things I do really try hard to do now is to create environments where people feel okay to come forward and speak up and talk about things and don't feel that they're going to sort of be sidelined by having those conversations, whether that's one-to-one with me or in open sessions, in group sessions. So again, I just come back to, you know, you're dead right, Savita. Yes, I should have been looking up and I should have been seeing those things, but you know, sometimes you just get into the whole work thing, and you know, it's again just creating those environments just to say, hey, you know, it'd be great if we could have this room or we could do this, and you go, oh right, okay, yeah, I didn't think about it. Right, how do we go about that? What do we need to do? Or, you know, who do I need to talk to and make these things happen? So hopefully I'm a lot better now, and I know to sort of look out for those things, but I'm pretty sure there's still a lot of things that I'm not aware of.
Lee, I'll come to you in literally just a second. I noticed you've got your hand up, but I just wanted to, Michael, would you actually tell us what the allyship continuum is? Because I know we've had a little bit of a chat about this, because you told me where you think you are on the allyship continuum.
Yeah, so I mean, look, Savita sort of picked it up a little bit earlier, and it's sort of where we are. So like, you know, seeing something and being passive about it, seeing something, doing something about it, or actually taking leadership, and that, I think there's 4 boxes on there. I've only just sort of found it myself, so I'm still learning about it and trying to understand it a bit more. I would say, you know, I'm probably where Savita said, you know, unconscious about it. I'm trying to be more conscious about things and driving on there. And it was a really nice way to sort of sum it up and look at that. And I'd never seen that sort of before, you know, and that I'll be open about the conversation we had earlier in the week, and you were talking about privilege, and I took a little bit of exception to the word. you know, I've always felt that I've had to work really, really hard. I've you know, left school with no qualifications really, and I've worked really, really hard to sort of achieve what you know, where I am today. And I wanted to work abroad, and I've gone and worked in the US for 5 years. That was really strange, because I was working in a foreign country, and I was made to realise that I was working in a foreign country, even though I looked the same as them. Every time I opened my mouth, everybody knew that I was different, and I learned a lot from that as well. And then coming back and, you know, sort of starting again and driving my career. So when people are talking about privilege and that, and it's like, I've had no privilege, you know. I've worked really, really hard for everything that I've got, but then understanding that continuum, and then understanding what, you know, we're actually talking about, I can see where the privilege comes now, and what that means, and how do I change, and how do I use the privilege that I've got to support and be that ally and drive things forward.
I love that, Michael. Absolutely love that. I want to bring Lee in, because you've had your hand up for a while.
Oh, thank you. I'll be really quick because I know we're running short on time now, but just really on the whole concept of being a leader, a manager, and making sure that you're looking after the interests of your team. It's something that I'm really passionate about, because I've got some fantastic young female professionals working in my team, and I will always do everything that I can just to make sure that I'm sharing the things that I experience as barriers, the lessons that I learned over the years, so that they don't have to go through the pain of learning everything exactly, you know, through that pain process. One of the things that I'm really keen to make sure that they learn early on is just to not be afraid to ask for what they need and to speak up. I think sometimes when you have young female professionals, there can be a little bit of caution about being seen to be pushy or overbearing, and I'm trying really hard to make sure that people understand that it's totally fine to ask for what you need. Also, it's about making sure that you're actually finding your own style of making those demands as well. Some people are a little bit more forceful with it. Other people feel that that is a bit rude, but it's just about making sure that you're building up the confidence so that it doesn't feel like you're climbing a mountain every time you need somebody's support, or you need somebody to give you a piece of work that they haven't delivered back, and so that you're not missing your deadlines.
Yeah, and I think what I took from what you just said there was around not lifting the ladder up, like keep that ladder down for other women, or anyone that's in a sort of a marginalised or underrepresented group, and try and make their road slightly easier if we can. That's what I sort of took from you there. Thank you, Lee. I'm going to shift the conversation on a little bit, and talk about a topic that has definitely in the last sort of few years become more commonplace for us to talk about, and that's around imposter syndrome. Because through talking to 150 women in digital in the NHS, they've all said yes, they experience that, and on a daily basis. And I've come to understand that this is just, it's not a female thing, this is absolutely men and women, it's a human thing. But also that sometimes I feel that men are less able to say that they have experienced imposter syndrome, and that can be quite difficult, and maybe also sort of feeling like, is there a weakness being shown? Is that sort of a career consequence? But I'd like to bring you in, Pia, because I know you've got a slightly different take on imposter syndrome, maybe from the one I've just been explaining.
Thanks, Bernie. Yeah, I think it's a really important topic because it comes up in almost every forum where we're talking about, you know, women's networks and so on. And fundamentally, and in fact, we almost need to also talk about changing the name of it. A syndrome is something that sort of suggests we've been afflicted by something, and something that's some sort of disease almost that relates to some innate qualities that women have. And I do use it in the context of women for obvious reasons. But so there is a change of the language to talking about it as imposter phenomenon, the imposter phenomenon. But my view and my research around imposter phenomena is that this really is a reflection on how women are functioning within the structural and cultural domains of hierarchical, typically masculinized organizations. And culture is determined at a leadership level, and that flows down into the organization. And imposter phenomena really means to feel as though you don't fit in. And that is based partly on your own perceptions of confidence and how you perceive yourself to be fitting in or not. And we are in a double bind as women, that if we are here and achieving and successful, we get a message that pretty much is some version of, you need to trim your sharp elbows. Okay. If we are unsuccessful or we haven't progressed, really the message is that's our own fault and we should have somehow fixed ourselves and be more confident, or we should be more trained, or we should be more something. We're somehow deficient in our ability to reach more successful heights. So we live in this double bind. When we arrive or when we reach more senior leadership levels, really what happens there is there is a paucity of female leaders. We all know that there's a big triangle in that space. And what happens is we get a message that really you don't fit in around here. You don't necessarily have the right leadership character traits that we all value. If you do, then you're described as a ballbuster. And if you don't, then you're sort of described as sort of weak and feeble. And when you reach the senior leadership levels, oftentimes it may be perceived that you are the exotic other. Okay. And the phenomena of imposter syndrome is this sense actually that it is not something that is innately within you, although I accept confidence makes a contribution. But it's generally a sense of messaging from within hierarchical organisations that you don't fit in. And that creates a sense of unease. And women are therefore being told, it's pretty difficult for you to get on around here. You're not quite right. You need to do something different. And therefore you're sitting here thinking, oh my God, can I do this job? And that's how it presents itself. But this is not about us as individuals. I want to shake off this mythology. I do not subscribe to the idea that I have imposter syndrome. And, you know, we need to think about that in a slightly different context. What's going on? What messages are we getting from external and internal, and try to rationalise and think about those slightly differently. These are not innate characteristics within us.
I think that's a brilliant take on it. And I think we've got used to sort of being open about it, haven't we, and saying that we experience it. But I love that you've sort of taken that and you're moving forward with it. You're not going to subscribe to the idea that you have imposter syndrome. Like, why should we actually subscribe to that? Sabitha, you did have your hand up. Did you want to come in and?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with everything that Pia said, and she said it so eloquently. And I suppose I have always said and been very adamant that I don't have imposter syndrome. Luckily, I had a mother who told me I was good enough and I am good enough, even though she didn't understand about the business world or anything like that. And that's self-belief. And I suppose one of the things, Pia, you said women are told. Well, we're not really told as well. I've heard on TED Talk, a lot of women go on the stage and say they have imposter syndrome, or we may have imposter. So we ourselves are sometimes saying it or teaching our little girls that these things exist. Look, we are good enough. Sometimes when you go to a workplace and you don't think you fit in, it's because you don't fit in. Nothing there was meant for you. Nothing there was built for you. There were no structures to support you, like the breastfeeding room that I talked about. There's nothing there. There's a lot of organizations I've been to, and I didn't fit in. I just didn't, because there's nothing there to make me feel welcome, to make me feel that my views, my identity, my experience will be shared, or will be shared as best practice, etc. So I suppose, again, for our team, for our children, for our girls, we are enough, and we don't have to pretend to not be good enough, because we are good enough. So I share the same sentiments about imposter syndrome. It doesn't exist in me, and I don't subscribe to it either.
Wonderful. Harvey, would you like to come in here? What were your experiences?
I think because my experiences have been, I have felt that imposter syndrome in meetings. So I've always been like very ambitious, very always about my career, like wanting to prove a point, I guess, to my family. You know, there's this thing, you know, I'm a female, I can do it, because I guess growing up, you know, my parents had a bit of an old school way of thinking, and I wasn't really encouraged to do, you know, educate myself. I wasn't really encouraged to go further, whereas my brother was. So from my experience, you know, my first organisation I worked in was an NHS organisation. It was a very supportive organisation. I was doing really well. And sometimes I'd go into a meeting and I'd have to double check that I'm in the right room, because I'd look around the room and go, oh, actually, these people are a lot older than me. There's no Asian person in this room. Like, you know, am I in this right meeting? It looks a bit too formal. So, you know, I used to kind of question myself a little bit in the beginning. But I think, you know, with having the right support from my management and the, you know, senior executives and the allyship, that's really important throughout your career. I obviously overcome that over you know, a number of years, but I think early on I did have that imposter syndrome. I did actually think, you know, should I be in this meeting? Let me double check, because sometimes people would look at you as you walked in like, you're a bit young to be in here, or, you know, are you sure you're meant to be in this room? This is a very important meeting. Are you sure? You know, I actually had somebody ask one time, sorry, what meeting have you come to attend? And I had to actually double check the agenda and say, well, actually, is this meeting? So I think I've had a slightly different experience, and I have felt it early on, I'd say.
Which puts you completely on the back foot to even begin the meeting. So it's, what sort of strategies or sort of coping mechanisms, or how have you moved forward when you've had those feelings? I have definitely had those feelings in lots and lots of situations. So I'm empathizing, but is there anything that you did that sort of helped you to accept those feelings and still do it anyway?
I think for me, it's around being prepared when you're entering a room. So preparation and having that confidence and having that mindset has been really important. So I had an experience early on in my career where I was a contracts officer, and I had obviously a manager, and I went to a meeting with this manager, and it was obviously two females, and it was a senior person. It was a director of ops person. We went to go meet about a project. And we obviously were explaining the procurement regulations to the person, why we need to do certain things, why we need to go out to tender. And this individual actually turned around and said, rules are to be broken. And can you both just go off and go and speak to, you know, bring one of your managers over here, because obviously he didn't accept what we were saying. So I was a bit shocked at that, because obviously I was just shadowing, and him saying that to my manager at the time, it was quite embarrassing, of being, you know, like, oh my God, I can't believe he's actually said this. So obviously we went back and we spoke to our management, and we had a female who was a leader in our team, and she actually went and had a conversation, and then the person had to apologize. That was one experience. And another experience I learned of was this same manager of mine went to a meeting with theatres once, and they basically told her to shuffle off and go and bring a manager in, and we're not, you know, we don't believe any of this stuff you're saying, because we can break the rules. And this manager of mine apparently was really upset by this at the time, and she actually was in tears. And again, they contacted the theatres, and the person had to apologise. So from that moment on, when I was going to experience the same individual in theatres, I just made sure that I had all my, you know, information, you know, beforehand before I got in there, knew exactly what I was talking about. So I just went in fully prepared. And the person actually tried a similar stance with me, because, you know, it was about a project. And she actually said to me, do you want me to go and get the consultant in now? Do you want to say all this to the consultant? Because I don't think they want to hear this. So I thought she was actually joking. And this lady, theatre manager, actually went and called the consultant in. And I think she was trying to scare me, you know, saying I'm going to bring the consultant in. And it turned out to be a quite successful meeting, because a consultant came in and I actually explained everything to the consultant. And he was really supportive. He actually said, you know what, I totally understand where you're coming from. Yeah, I'm happy to support you, because he wasn't even aware of some of the new supplies on the market. They were just talking about something that they'd done historically, and there's no other supplies. And I said, well, have you heard of this person, this company, and this company? And he said, oh, no, actually, we haven't. So, yeah, we'd be willing to look into that. So I think it's about being prepared, and learning off the mistakes of others as well, and learning off your other people's experiences and speaking with each other.
Yeah, that preparation is always like absolutely key for me. Even this morning, I was experiencing imposter syndrome, being invited to host an event and thinking, right, okay, I need to make sure that I'm prepared. I'd sent Jen a message yesterday about all my preparation. So, and obviously spoken to all of you wonderful panelists this week. So, Michael, I'd like your take on imposter syndrome from a male perspective, if I can, please.
Yeah, so you know, I've suffered it. I didn't realise what I was going through. Luckily, I had a really good business coach that supported me and helped me and helped me to sort of understand those things that I was going through. It's it's difficult. I think for many it's slightly different. There's the whole culture that, you know, nothing can faze me. I'm this and I'm that, and you know, and I can do anything that I want to do, sort of thing. And but it's not like that at all. You know, and it is really, really difficult sometimes. And you know, you find yourselves in these situations. You know, and a bit like Harvey was just talking about. You know, I have found myself in similar situations, and you think, right, okay, how am I going to sort of deal with this, and how am I going to take that forward, and how do I sort of make sure that I am listened to, and that, and yeah, now I'm sort of a lot more, again, that journey and learning, and I'm a lot more aware of it now. I can look at, you know, how do I sort of deal with that, and how do I sort of put myself in a better place in there. But also, I think the flip side to that is, you know, making, you know, my team aware and the people around me are aware, and trying to help them not to sort of fall into that trap. And you know, if you're there and I've invited you there because I respect you, and I respect your opinions. And you know, again, making sure, come back to that listening again, making sure that, you know, I'm trying not to put people in that position, and encourage them and give them the tools to be able to speak up and work on those things.
I think it's becoming easier for men to talk about these subjects with each other. No. I think you know, again, I suppose it goes back to, you know, we look at today. You know, I think this is a fantastic opportunity for men to come and join this and listen and understand and just be a bit more educated about what's going on, and they'll learn something about themselves. But I think what have we got, 3 or 4 men on here today, you know. And again, there's lots of really, really good men out there. You know, we've talked about several today, and it's not because we don't want to be part of this, but I don't feel we feel part of it, or we think, okay, this is a woman thing, and you know, we need to let you, you know, have that space and that time. But if we don't engage with you and we don't understand, you know, what some of these issues are, then how can we change to support you and work with you, and you know, move away from our own imposter syndrome, as well as, you know, supporting you guys on the journey. And you know, what Pia and Savita said, you know, hats off to you guys. It's fantastic that you can be like that and drive that. And yeah, hopefully we can get everybody to that place. It's so interesting, isn't it? Because I'm thinking, what more could we do to include? And then I'm thinking, why is it on us? So I'm having that battle in my own head as I'm even sort of thinking about it. But Keith, you've got your hand up. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I wanted to come in and support the conversation, really, but as one of the few men on this call. But I love the discussion that Pia had around imposter syndrome, because it's quite interesting, because it made me start thinking about different language to that. So I was thinking about, is it actually self-doubt, which is a human trait? Is it about I don't belong, which might be a human trait? And I'm not sure I've still got that language right, but I get the point you're making. We do apply labels to things, and therefore we get completely confused. I do think generally, and I think I fall victim to this sometimes, that men don't find it quite hard to face that issue themselves. And sometimes the way they present it then becomes the wrong thing and has an effect. what I did like was there's a lot of conversation about invisible barriers, and I think there's something about how men become more aware of those invisible barriers. I'm not sure all of them will help resolve them, and listening to some of the stories, it's disheartening to hear how many barriers get created. I wouldn't be surprised if I've created barriers myself, but I'm probably not conscious of them without knowing it. So it's kind of like, how do you know that and how do you listen? So I think there is something about more men listening in and being party to and being more aware of this kind of discussion on a wider basis. And I'm quite sad there's only 4 of us on this call, because the more of us that are listening, the more and participating, the more we're learning together. Because I don't think we've not all of us have got all the answers, have we? But the more we're exploring it, the more we're starting to understand and starting to do something about it. So I guess I was kind of trying to be humble about some of my own experiences. I'm loving the conversation. It's amazing, but I'm also trying to pick out some of those points. But I think there is an inhibitor on men around our own self-doubt and how that presents. I'm not sure I've got the right words, but I started to write words like, sometimes it presents as arrogance, listening to some of the case studies that are there, and I almost that our insecurity, and we're covering it over, therefore we're applying invisible barriers because of our own desire to cover up our own self-doubt, because men don't talk about this stuff at all amongst ourselves. It's all football or sport or like bravado, other stuff, and da. So actually that's probably creating an inhibitor in itself. And sorry for the ramble, but
it's not rambling. And Keith, I feel really, really happy that in some small way you felt comfortable enough to contribute. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. That I think we worry about tripping up over language, and that I sort of want to say, well, just have a go. If you do trip up over the language, well, then someone hopefully will correct you, and you'd be humble enough to be corrected, I guess. Pia, I'd like to bring you in here.
Yeah, I think it's a really, it's a really interesting point. And, look, some of the topics can be quite confronting, because actually a lot of this is subconscious. And what we're talking about is, as I call it, it's not the bum slapping sexism of the sort of 1970s or whatever it is, right? I don't think that that's what pervades in organisations, and it's much more subtle, and it's actually got a name. It's called second generation bias. Okay, this is about access to networks. It's about accessing opportunities. It's about language. It's about being heard in meetings and all sorts of other things. And it's called second generation bias. It's around stereotypes. Okay. And it's around the kind of expectation that women will take the notes in the meeting, for example. It's a very basic example, okay? But in a hospital setting, my research showed that the vast majority of the communal work within a clinical department is done by women, okay? That's the rotas, the employee wellbeing, it's the training, training of new members of staff and all that sort of stuff. And what's happening in the clinical context is men are using their non-clinical time to advance their careers, okay? So to do research projects, quality improvement projects and stuff like that. And this is something that is very subtle, and it's very intangible. It's quite tricky for people to put their hands on. But it is called second generation bias. Keith, I wrote to you about the golf day. That is slam dunk on the second generation bias matter, because it's privileging male stereotypical activities, it's privileging male access, it's encouraging male participation from our supplier community. And I know we've done other things, we're diversifying and stuff like that, but the mere connotation of it is undermining to women. And we need to, we've got to be open about it. It's not to criticize people for making decisions like that. It's not to make or diminish men in the context or anything like that. But we mustn't shy away from the fact that men have held privilege in the workplace for the foreseeable past, okay? And we are sort of trying to make ripples, trying to make changes, trying to bring an inflection point. But all the data shows that we have still got a significant amount of road to travel on. And despite, we are sort of preaching to the converted, if you like, but the reality is that there's still a weight of privilege and power within the male workforce. And that's really what we are talking about and what we experience. So it's not to say that it's intentional all the time. It's sometimes clumsy and it's sometimes maybe uneducated, or uneducated sounds pejorative. I don't mean it like that. It's maybe less awareness. And you know, I will be less aware on race matters, for example. And I think, you know, understanding where you have less awareness is a responsibility as a leader to educate yourself. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, I think what I've done is, and Pia's actually educated me this week, definitely around the imposter syndrome. Pia, I was really grateful for your reference to the article. And I think hopefully, you know, we're all on that learning journey together. Michael, you've been really honest about your learning journey. There's a couple of references I've put into the chat there because they were just really useful for me. And I think that whole thing about language, I tentatively used language and sort of tried and sort of, is this okay? And you sort of do that at first, and then eventually that language becomes just in your suite of words that you use every day, and you become much more comfortable. Tracy, I'm conscious that we've kind of got about 5 minutes to the end. Is it okay for me to talk about another topic, or shall we do some closing?
I think we probably need to let these lovely people back to their
jobs.
And they'll probably have a meeting at half 11. I just wanted to say I've gone through, I can't tell you how many emotions through this hour and a half. It's just been, I've gone from goosebumps to tears to choking to laughing to sitting going, yes, I agree with you. Pia, I'm part of that bum slapping early career. And I literally started my career in the early 80s, and I got lots of bum slaps and inappropriate comments from men in the organisation. I also worked in South Africa, where it is still today extremely male dominated in the corporate area. So completely laughed my socks off at that one. And yes, it's taken some time for me to feel good in my own skin, because I've had doubts about who I am and what I am and how am I going to get where I need to be. But I've had some amazing male mentors in my career, but I've also equally had some amazing women in my life. So it's been there. We can't change the narrative if we don't have our allies at the table. This women's network, last year when I spoke to Michael, he said, I didn't think I was invited to the conference. It's a women's network. Well, it is a women's network, but we need the fellas there as well. And I can't begin to tell you that what the change and the journey I've watched Michael on since March last year to now. He's like a changed bloke. He's just amazing. And Keith is one of our greatest supporters. Mike, Simon Clark, Rob Knott. We've got brilliant men and allies in this network. So we want to build on that. You do belong. You are included in our network. We want you to feel that you belong here. And that's going to be our mission for the next period, 12 months, however long. But we're going to continue to send the message out that our male allies are really important. You have women within your lives. You've got moms, you've got sisters, you've got aunties, uncles. You've got some women in your life. They may be your daughters. I have 2 amazing daughters. I've always told them, you are fabulous. You can do whatever it is that you want to do. Unfortunately, my oldest child was diagnosed with dyslexia. However, it only happened when she got to university. How did that happen? Because people weren't listening. People weren't taking time out to hear her voice. So I think, and still today, she has a degree and she's amazing. So I've always encouraged my girls to be the strong, independent women that they are today, and to grab and progress their career. And old mom and granny here will support them at every step that they make. So please, we are here for each other. Everybody belongs in this network and community. Can't wait to see what the next 12 months is going to bring for us. We've got lots of exciting things on the agenda. Our conference in September is starting to shape up really well. We've got a meeting next week, Clara and the committee and I, to talk about the content. We have Dr. Sam Collins, for those who were at the conference last year. She's going to be delivering another amazing session with all of our network and allies. So please have a great weekend. Thank you all for your support and your ongoing support. Thank you to Lexmark again for sponsoring, to Bernie for facilitating today, Jenny for watching out for all of the messages, reading and trying to do both. So thank you so much. Thank you to Louise for supporting from E18, and to our amazing panel. You were amazing. I can't tell you how emotional I am right now.
Thank you so much for everyone on the panel for sharing the experiences. It's just, I've popped that in there, but really your thoughts, your opinions and your personal experiences have been amazing.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Have a great time, everybody, and we'll see you at the next event.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Hi all. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.